Sadistic game hosts, drug-addicted serial killers, powerful elites who bet on struggling people killing each other, would-be baby killers, a deranged rapper who calls himself Thanos. Squid Game has brought us some truly evil characters, and today we're ranking every character from the entire Squid Game series, good to evil. With that out of the way, let's start off with the most pure-hearted characters and work our way down. These characters are the good. Okay, now this time I know it's going to be controversial. We went back and forth about where this guy belonged, but in the end, we just couldn't place gi-hun, player 456, anywhere but our top spot. We'll start this section off by saying that gi-hun is not in this position because he's the least flawed character. He's far from that. From his status as an absentee father to his occasional willingness to kill in the games when it's necessary, gi-hun is consistently portrayed as a man who's both sincerely kind and greatly flawed. But if you ask me, that's the most beautiful thing about his character. Because despite his flaws and despite having every reason to become absolutely broken by what he's been through, gi-hun is without a doubt the most selfless character in the ensemble cast, and it's all because of two little words.
The baby.
Not only did he carry Junhei's baby across in the jump rope challenge, but he was determined to go back and carry her across with like a minute left on the clock. He spends the rest of the games protecting the baby with his life, ultimately sacrificing his life in the final round so she could live on. It's also worth noting that before the final game, gi-hun had been given a sort of pseudo plea bargain by the frontman to kill the remaining contestants, who were all either completely unhinged or heartless sociopaths. Despite having, literally every reason to kill these guys, gi-hun decided to not choose violence until it was absolutely necessary, and that proves he's not the kind of guy the frontman thought he'd be. He was even willing to let Myung-gi win as long as he agreed to keep the baby alive, until the latter proved to be a complete piece of human excrement, but more on that later. There are many characters who are less flawed than gi-hun, but he's without a doubt the guy who made the most sacrifices for the sake of others. It's thanks to him that Se-byok's brother was able to see his mom again, and that his daughter will never have to financially struggle for anything. And that's not to mention Junhei's baby, of course. While he is the most selfless character, though, we had to give gi-hun the Darwin Center Medal because you literally could have lived if you just pressed the freaking button before fighting 333. He's survived these games twice, worked to track them down for years, and you're telling me he can't remember to press a big flashy button that's right in front of him. I enjoyed the season overall, but I needed to vent about that. Okay. After thankfully surviving last season, Park Yong-seok, player 246, earns the honor of our Silver Medal of Good. In this show, even the relatively good people have to make serious sacrifices. Many of the players have good reasons to join the games and work hard to win, but by the end, few of them stood out like Yong-seok. Out of necessity to pay for his little daughter's blood cancer treatment, Yong-seok worked his butt off as an amusement park portrait artist, and when times got even more desperate, he was willing to risk his neck at the Squid Game. In addition to being a great father, he also treats the other contestants with respect and kindness. During the Mingle game, it was all thanks to him that Hyun-ju and Young-mi survived as long as they did. But his role in the new season is what cements him as our silver medalist. We mistakenly thought that 246's elimination in Season 2 was final, only for Season 2 to immediately confirm that it was a certain double agent soldier who eliminated him, later helping him escape disguised as a guard until he could go and reunite with his daughter. Young-seok also helped gi-hun with his rebellion against the games in Season 2, proving that he was willing to place his life on the line for others. On top of his genuinely adorable relationship with his daughter, his role as both a heroic player and a great dad earned him a very close Silver Medal of Good. And the Bronze Medal of Good goes to the death we were most unprepared for this season, Cho Hyun-ju, player 120. Hyun-ju was already the MVP last season, and by a pretty comfortable margin. She constantly used her strength and skills to protect vulnerable players, from the pregnant Junhee to the elderly Gyeonja and even the terrified Young-mi. Her selflessness is amped up to 11 in the final season. After kicking butt and taking names for the entirety of the hide-and-seek game, she manages to find the exit before any of her teammates, and being the absolute Giga Chad, or like Giga Charlotte or something she of course went back for Gyeonja, Junhee, and the baby, which would tragically cause her demise as Myung-gi slaughtered her without a second thought. The only bad quality 120 had, as far as I'm concerned, was the fact that she made me cry. Like, come on, man, we couldn't get 2 more episodes of The GOAT? I'd love to use this opportunity to vent about the crypto cretin, but believe me when I say there'll be plenty of time for that later on. It feels straight up wrong to place Ali Abdul, player 199, outside of the top 3. If we only looked at Season 1, Ali would be the easy top pick. It's poetic that gi-hun went back to rescue someone during red light green light in the second season, considering that's the only way he himself survived in the first season. Ali used his strength for good throughout the game. We saw it from the very beginning when he saved gi-hun during red light green light, keeping him from falling out of position with just one arm. 199 was genuinely a kind, trusting man who was determined to survive for his family's sake while not harming anyone, which would sadly lead to his demise in the marbles game. In a very literal sense, Ali's only flaw was that he was just too kind-hearted. The only thing he wanted was whatever was best for his friends and family. Without any bad attributes to speak of, the only reason we have for keeping Ali this low is the fact that he has fewer selfless deeds than the top 3, which isn't saying much since he's still an incredible guy. There's also the fact that he tragically wasn't able to help his family in the end, meaning they actually might be worse off since he left. His wife and child won't ever have a way of knowing what happened to him, and there's no proof that he left behind any sort of backup plan. While it's not a moral failing by any means, it does keep him a little bit beneath our top 3. Up next, we have Kim Jun-hee, player 222. Man, poor Jun-hee. Pregnant, ghosted by her baby daddy for 6 months, and ending up at a deadly kids game arena to pay off her debts. That's rough already, but her story only gets more tragic going forward. When she gives birth during the hide-and-seek challenge, she has to deal with both a newborn baby and a fractured ankle, which make it practically impossible to survive for long. After gi-hun brings her baby across the finish line safely, she stops him from risking his life to go back for her the only way she knows how, by stepping off the platform and sacrificing her life so that her baby will live and have a good man around to ensure that she's taken care of. Another member of the, man, it feels wrong to not put you in the top 3 club, Hwang Jun-ho. Jun-ho is the most prominent character outside of the games themselves, acting as the detective determined to track it down and put a stop to it. The only real moral failing this guy has is failing to disclose the frontman's identity as his brother. But given how tough of a situation that is, and how hard he works to track him down anyway, we can't take too many points away from him for that. We'd place him higher if it weren't for his investigation being a complete bust, but we still can't deny his value as an ally to gi-hun. Wherever he goes from here, he'll still be doing a lot of good by taking care of Jun-hee's baby, entrusted to him by his distant brother. And he seems to have built a genuine friendship with Mr. Choi, which shows that he's open-minded to give even criminals a chance to become better people. One of Season 2's most innocent players, Kim Young-mi, player 95, is next. We don't really get too much of a backstory on her compared to some of the other newcomers. All we know is that she's a sweet, timid girl who has perhaps the most reasonable and realistic reaction of anyone to these games. Absolute, unadulterated terror. She doesn't have much of a personality aside from being shy and kind-hearted, but she was a total sweetheart and one of the ones we were holding out hope for making it to Season 3. Yeah, remind us not to do that again. While we were talking about devastating deaths, let's talk about Ji-young, player 240 from Season 1. She seemed a bit standoffish at first, not shy about openly mocking other players she didn't approve of, like the pastor. That said, given her background, this cynicism is totally understandable. She witnessed her father, a pastor himself, murder his mother and beg God for forgiveness, which enraged Jung so much that she took his life right then and there. Having nowhere to go after being released from prison, Ji-young came to the games because, well, why not, right? In the end, she was the first person to really get Kong Se-byuk to open up about her trauma and stayed true to her promise to make sure that she won no matter what, which just happened to mean throwing the marble game and sacrificing her life so Se-byuk could live. Oh Mar-sun is up next. She was gi-hun's mother in Season 1 and ended up being the main reason he joined the Squid Game in the first place. When she refused to pay for her own diabetes treatment due to already struggling to pay for her and gi-hun's apartment, gi-hun took matters into his own hands and went to win the prize money, only for it to tragically end up futile, as Mar-sun would die during gi-hun's week at the Squid Game. Despite her often cold, nagging demeanor, it was clear that she genuinely loved her son, being the one to encourage him to step up and find a way to keep his daughter in Korea so he wouldn't lose his relationship with her. Now, let's talk about Jong-bae, player 390. You might also remember him as gi-hun's friend from the last few episodes of Season 1. If you're anything like us, though, you legit forgot he existed. Worry not, though, he'll remind you by being one of the MVPs of this season, always available to his buddies when they need someone to talk to or even help storm the headquarters of the Squid Game as a whole. Jong-bae is the kind of friend who will straight up force feed you if you aren't eating properly, and it's stuff like this that made his demise in the end all the more devastating. Sure, it was revealed that the guy was the one who got gi-hun into horse betting in the first place, but if you ask us, he more than made up for that with his performance here. Nearing the end of our fully good characters is Semi, player 380. Semi is a relatively normal girl who allies herself with the people she thinks will give her the best chance of winning. Whether it's through trustworthiness or malleability, she joins Thanos Thanos and Namgyu because they were stupid and therefore easier to manage, which does show that she has a bit of a manipulative side. She's also surprisingly sweet though. She was the first one to befriend Min-soo and look out for him throughout the games, acting as a constant support for him despite his cowardice, even keeping him from being corrupted by their other teammates. Semi just wanted someone she could trust to help each other through a tough time, and we'll get into why she chose a very wrong person for that later on. Man, Squid Game really has a way with making the most cool, down-to-earth people, giving them 5 minutes to shine, and then just having them unjustly murdered, huh? Or at least we got to see her make a post-mortem cameo in Season 3. Honestly, forgiving the guy who watched her die seems very in character for her. Losing a few points from last time, Jung Gyung-ja, player 149, is a bit lower on our good end. 149 proved herself to be one of the most decent people in the games, becoming a motherly figure to Junhei and Hyunju, slowly coming to accept the latter's identity and being one of the few sources of care and comfort the former has in one of the hardest phases of her entire life. The worst we could say about her in Season 2 was that she's sometimes rather tactless, especially when she straight up called Hyunju unsightly before they knew each other. But at the end of the day, she's a caring woman who always watches over the youngsters surrounding her. Unfortunately, she has a couple rough moments in Season 3. Most notably, and obviously, was the absolutely tragic twist of fate that forced her to kill her own son. We wouldn't call this a completely evil deed because player 7 was fully ready and willing to murder a woman who'd just given birth while holding her newborn baby. And it's not like Gyung-ja could beat a young grown man in a hand-to-hand fight, though she probably could have stabbed somewhere else, maybe. Just a thought. In any case, it was also Gyung-ja's words of encouragement that brought gi-hun back to reality. Yeah, I never thought a game of hide and seek would make me sob as much as this one did, so let's move on to a slightly more uplifting story. Closing out this category is none other than the most badass character of the bunch, Kang No-yul. This former North Korean soldier was labeled a traitor when she made the quite reasonable decision to defect to the south. Last season, we placed her near the bottom of our gray area for what we thought was her murder of player 246. Yeah, our bad on that one. This season, No-yul proved herself to be one of the best characters in the cast. While searching for a way to reunite with her own daughter, No-yul managed to help save another man's life and save his daughter from growing up with blood cancer or without her dad. No-yul faked 246's death, forced another guard at gunpoint to save his life, and proceeded to risk her neck disguising him as a soldier so he could escape, fighting and killing numerous soldiers herself. Perhaps best of all, she gave Na-yeon a really tasty looking lollipop, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that she's one of the greatest fictional heroes of all time. Well, these next guys might not have deserved rough fates either, but those in the gray area are willing to get a little more dirt/blood on their hands. The first player in this category needs no introduction. Kong Se-byok, player 67, is one of the most iconic characters from the entire show, and for good reason. No, being hot is not the reason in question, or not the only one at least. Se-byok is a North Korean defector who grew up in a territory defined by war, violence, and fear. When she managed to make it out along with her little brother, she devoted herself to getting enough money to regain custody of him and to bring her mother to the south. Although Se-byok certainly has one of the most valid reasons for joining the games, she's still one of the most ruthless players there, and this extends to her time before the game too. She's willing to threaten people with knives or hot coffee, whatever's most convenient, has an extensive criminal record with joksu, which we can only assume includes some seriously heinous stuff, and is willing to pickpocket money when the need arises, which, as we saw with gi-hun, can sometimes hurt others in brutal financial situations. But none of what Se-byok does is ever out of malice. She genuinely just wants to survive and make a better life for her family after a lifetime of experiencing war and poverty. She was also the one who helped gi-hun remember the correct tile jumping order in glass stepping stones, and the one who stopped him from straight up murdering Sung-woo afterwards, saving both his body and his heart from falling far from grace. Her words even inspired him in Season 3 when he was about to kill player 100, which frankly I would have blamed him way less for. If Se-byok had lived longer, I don't doubt that she'd become an amazing person. Screw you for that one, Sung-woo. Next up is Season 2's most despised competitor, Min-soo, player 125. This season we were expecting Min-soo to either have a redemption arc where he became an absolute badass, or double down and go from a coward to a full-on villain. In the end though, he didn't really do either. Not fully, at least. While Min-soo is nowhere near the spineless schmuck he was in Season 2, he isn't necessarily a hero. Min-soo is quite literally just concerned with surviving and becomes more ruthless towards the psychopaths like Namgyu left in the running. He did manage to outsmart Namgyu and get him eliminated, though his newfound courage was mostly due to drugs, which he stole from Namgyu. Hey, we can't blame him too much. Namgyu was a jerk. While Min-soo is nowhere near a hero, he definitely doesn't descend into villain territory either. In fact, he's shown to suffer from severe trauma and even hallucinations due to both his newfound addictions and his guilt over letting Se-mi die. He's not a hero, but it's clear the dude has a moral compass at the end of the day, and he did get that annoying shaman lady out of the running, which I for one, was perfectly fine with, and he at least avenged Semi's death by tricking Namgyu into going after an empty drug necklace. This next guy falls into the category of neutral parties we wish we could put way higher. Choi Woo-seok is a gangster with a heart of gold. Maybe silver, at least bronze. Whatever metal it's made of though, this guy's got a pretty good conscience for an organized criminal. He helps gi-hun find the salesman in the beginning of season 2 and later joins Junho in the search for the Squid Game Island to avenge his boss. It was also thanks to Woo-seok's observation that Junho discovered that Captain Park was not just a traitor, but a soldier working under the frontman, a realization that almost certainly saved the detective's life. He loses some points for the whole loan shark thing, but for how good of a friend he turned out to be, we feel like it'd be a shame to place him any lower. Mr. Kim falls just beneath his old friend. In the insanely intense rock, paper, scissors -1 game that the suit man forces him and Woo-seok to play, Mr. Kim had a blatant opportunity to win when Woo-seok accidentally threw 2 rocks at once. Despite this, he intentionally refused to take one of his hands away, sacrificing his own life so Woo-seok could live to see his wife again. We place him beneath Woo-seok on the sole basis that Mr. Kim is a higher ranking gangster, which means he almost certainly has more blood on his hands. But for a greed-driven loan shark, he's definitely one of the more reasonable characters in the series. We're nearing the end of the gray area, so it's time to talk about the girl who was great at everything except for the things she wasn't. Han Min-yo, player 212, was, I'm gonna say it, she was an icon. Come on, sure, she was rude and dishonest, but not entirely evil. Han Min-yo was a woman just trying to survive any way she could, and she had 2 particular skills: arson and boobs. We give her the Lust Center medal for her usage of sexuality to manipulate others to join her team. To limited success, she uses her smarts to make friends with strong allies, and to her credit, she is loyal to them. That isn't until they cross her. Once her limited-time lover boy, Jok-soo, betrays her, she makes good on her promise to kill him later on by taking him down in the Glass Stepping Stones challenge. This may have been motivated by hatred and revenge, but by taking him down, she indirectly saved the lives of gi-hun, Sang-woo, and Se-byok. Tack on the fact that she doesn't really seem keen on intentionally harming anyone, and you have a girl who's neither heroic nor villainous. She's just looking out for number 1, or number 212 in this case. Closing out the gray area is Byung-gi, player 111. You'll remember this crooked doctor as the one who offered to harvest organs from deceased players in exchange for information on the games. This is an absolutely depraved thing to do, of course, and the fact that Byung-gi was willing to do it shows that he's got some serious moral faults. That being said, in his defense, he's just using the skills he has to survive in a horrible situation. Byung-gi never attempts to hurt his fellow contestants, only to survive any way he can short of murder. When he suspects the staff is conning him, he attacks them out of a mix of anger, sleep deprivation, and panic, and given that they're his captors, we don't blame him much for this either. Still, like 212, 111 is just looking out for number 1, so while we wouldn't call him a villain, we definitely won't call him a hero either. But I bet you've all been waiting for this part. Grab your torches, pitchforks, regular forks, whatever else. This is the bad to evil section. Now, this might be a surprising pick, but we're placing Park Young-sik, player 7, just barely inside of the bad category. Despite being the son of the absolute legend known as 149, this guy got his family in enough financial trouble due to his gambling problems to end up in the Squid Game. Not only were the financial losses severe enough for him to get involved there, but they were severe enough to prompt his elderly mother to join as well. Even so, he has his good qualities, such as sticking by his mother no matter what in the competition. Unfortunately, sticking with his mother was his undoing. Kinda. See, when Young-sik wasn't able to kill any of the hiders throughout the game, we kinda thought that he was just too kind-hearted to go through with it, a trait that could have placed him in the good category, but apparently he just wasn't willing to kill anyone he'd have a fight to kill, as shown by the fact that he was fully ready to kill Jun-hee, an injured woman who just finished giving birth. I mean, granted he refused Gyun-ja's offer to sacrifice herself, but bro, do you want a medal for that? Like, congrats, you didn't kill your elderly mother to save your skin, you were still ready to kill an injured, vulnerable woman and make her child an orphan moments after she was born? While he did own up to his evil deed and apologized, the fact he was willing to do something so awful sadly cements his placement in our lowest category. And even then, it's nothing compared to the rest of these guys. Well, that is, except for Cho Sang-woo, player 21. He's a very complex character, despite being arguably the main antagonist of the first season. A childhood friend of gi-hun's, he was known as the pride of Sangmun-dong, as a distinguished graduate from Seoul National University. He made it in life until he messed up by embezzling funds and ruining his image, leading him into the games so he could protect his mother from his poor decisions. But in his determination to right his wrongs, Sang-woo was ironically only adding more to the list. While he was a compassionate person by nature, like giving Ali money for the bus and checking on player 271 after Jok-soo murdered him, his ruthlessness distorted who he actually was as a person. During the marble game, he manipulated Ali into helping him win by tricking him into carrying a bag of pebbles instead of marbles, effectively murdering him in the process. He then rushed the glass manufacturer despite him being the only reason they made it as far as they did in round 5, and most egregiously, he murdered Kong Se-byuk when she was already bleeding out just to make the final round easier on himself. But given his desperation to survive, we have to view most of his actions as necessary evils rather than things he'd do naturally. With the exception of Se-byuk, Sang-woo only resorted to violence when he felt it was absolutely necessary. And if it weren't for that scene, we'd honestly just place him in the gray area. But while basically everything else he did was out of desperation, killing an already dying girl is one of the lowest things anyone else did, and quite a fall from grace for the so-called pride of Sangmun-dong. Following Sang-woo, we have the self-proclaimed Shaman of the Sea, Seon-yo, player 44. Remember Han Min-yo? Well, we asked if she could come back for season 2, but all Netflix said was, "We have her at home." And out came Seon-yo. She seems to be some kind of weird psychic, instantly sensing that gi-hun was at the Squid Game because of vengeful spirits, which is kind of true to her credit. Nonetheless, she also routinely threatens people, clearly views herself as above everyone, I mean, literally she almost never leaves her high-seated bed, and prayed for all of her former allies to die when they betrayed her. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot to mention that season 3 all but confirms that she's full of crap about the whole shaman thing. What a surprise! It doesn't stop her from conning vulnerable players into following her wisdom, though. It did feel wrong to take the Pride Center medal from Thanos, that is, if it were going to anyone else but Seon-yo. In a similar vein, next up we have Kong Dae-ho, player 388. Last time around, we were looking over this guy's entry on our good to evil video, and we wondered if we were too hard on him. Then he just casually revealed that the random hunch we had about him faking being Marine was right, and yeah, he just lost all credibility. Stolen valor is a scummy thing to do, and we'd be surprised if Squid Game was the first place Dae-ho committed it, considering he even had a fake tattoo. If Dae-ho had a conscience, he could have confessed to the fraud before being trusted to go back for the magazines, but his cowardice cost numerous lives, including one of an actual Marine. We wish this guy had more screen time, but no matter what kind of backstory they cooked up, nothing could make him a respectable guy after all that. Quick shout out to player 278 from the first games. This was Joksu's little minion guy. Pretty dumb, very creepy, but he participated in the murderings that happened during the midnight fight, so we'll just say watching this guy lose his marbles was very satisfying. His name is Choi Soo-bong, but let's be real, you all know him as Thanos, player 230. Thanos is a popular internet rapper who is visibly shocked when anyone doesn't know who he is. The only time he's nice to people is when they're subservient to him, like promising to take pictures with his fans once they get out of the game. Thanos isn't a mastermind or anything, but he is an impulsive junkie with very few morals, which makes him pretty dangerous all the same. He killed multiple people in front of him during red light, green light, which could quite literally only serve to make the game harder on himself. That gets him a few more points in the psychopath scale. He was also one of the most outspoken about keeping the games going so we could get as much money as possible, and was always more than willing to start fights with anyone who opposed him and ready to throw anyone he couldn't use under the bus. He does fill the love to hate role quite nicely for his season, and we do feel some sympathy for him because of his struggles with suicidal thoughts, but that really does nothing to excuse how trashy of a person he really is. Still, we were missing him after all the death and child endangerment season 3 introduced. Captain Park, we trusted you, man. At least we did throughout most of season 2, but after he was revealed as a traitor during the finale, season 3 went even further into his true nature. It turns out that Park wasn't an ordinary traitor, but one of the soldiers in the Squid Game, one who was apparently trusted enough by the frontman to keep Jun-ho from discovering the island's location, ensuring that the games could proceed as planned. There's no telling how many people Park put to death throughout his career, and if his own men stepped out of line, he was more than willing to add them to the list. But he's not anywhere near as bad as the frontman, aka Hong In-ho. It's hard for us to even give him this much leeway, frankly, as the head of the games. In-ho was directly responsible for more deaths than any other character, barring maybe Il-nam. He also doesn't find full redemption by any means in the final season, as the end heavily implies that he's still going to run the games in the future. So, why are we placing him higher than we did last time? Well, while he didn't have a redemption arc, I really don't see how he could, to be honest, In-ho at least proves to have some morality in the end. When the game's near the end, he offers gi-hun a chance at survival for himself and the baby, giving him a knife to take out the opposing team members, leaving himself and the baby as the only ones left. This was a choice In-ho accepted from Il-nam during his own time in the games, but gi-hun took the high road and backed out, only keeping the knife for self-defense. Ruthlessness aside, the fact that In-ho tried to protect gi-hun and the baby shows that there's still something of a noble side to him, as does the fact that following the baby's win, In-ho left both her and the prize money with his brother. He also had the courtesy to deliver gi-hun's belongings and money to his daughter, proving that while he's still undoubtedly evil, he has at least some humanity left in his heart. Quick shout out to player 203. This guy was honestly just brutal. He teep kicked that one chick off the jump rope bridge and then had no problem leading the charge in the final game to attempt to kill the baby. And when that didn't work, he basically beats one of the guys in his group half to death and snaps his leg without a second thought. Oh Il Nam was full of crud, but he was right about one thing. Some people are selfish, callous monsters. Kim Jong-dae, player 100, was a character I was begging to die. I'm the kind of guy who feels a little bad for stepping on a bug, and even I was cheering when this guy got his just desserts. Player 100 is an absolutely heartless bastard, and we don't say that lightly. Throughout all of his time in the series, he's a callous, cruel man who actively cheers for others to die so he can win as much money as possible. He'll also betray anyone when it's convenient for him, from beating one of his own allies to a pulp to try and secure a place in the final tower in Squid Game to kicking Seon-yo out of the exit after she led him to it in the first place. This guy's such a scumbag that he made me feel bad for Shaman Chick. That's low, man. Part of what makes this guy so bad is not just how he's willing to kill, but it's that he does so from the constant position of cowardice. Seriously, how did this guy make it this far? Someone this pathetic should not be ranked number 5 on a leaderboard of 457. And you know what's crazy? I think we justified his position already, and we didn't even mention the fact that he was literally ready to murder a baby just because the players would be splitting the prize money with it. He also rallied the other players to gang up on gi-hun and the baby, trying to manipulate him into handing her over to be slaughtered. Jong-dae and his allies were nothing more than heartless cowards. It doesn't get much worse than being willing to kill a baby just to make yourself a little bit richer. Oh, and turning that last guy into a lunchbox was his brilliant idea too. Up next, we have probably the most infamous contestant from season 1, Oh Il Nam, player 1. Let's begin this entry with a moment of silence for those of us who absolutely loved this sweet old man, shed tears for his death, only to find out that he was the founder of the Squid Games. It turns out that Il Nam was a loan shark whose clients got so rich that they got bored, so he came to the perfectly reasonable conclusion of, hey, what if we just put poor people in a gymnasium and force them to play children's games under penalty of death? I think something was wrong with this guy's brain way before the brain tumor, but with that being said, he seemed very aware of what he was doing, and when he finally got bored of watching the games play out as a VIP, he saw his end was coming near and decided just to join in on the fun for a little while. To his credit, he did give them all a chance to back out by voting to stop the games after red light, green light. What's more is that his brain tumor was a true burden he had to carry, and he did seem to genuinely like and care for gi-hun, sacrificing his chance to play in the final few rounds so he could live, but none of that comes even close to redeeming him for his actions. This guy herded thousands of vulnerable people over the years to act as playthings for a few rich people to enjoy for a while before 99% of them were brutally murdered, and his excuse was, well, people are selfish anyway, so there. Huh? You mean like gi-hun, who constantly treated you with respect, generosity, and overall altruism? Or like Ali, who risked his neck to save gi-hun in the first game while knowing he could die for it? Yeah, okay, many people are selfish, but piss off Il Nam. It's also worth noting that Il Nam's deal with In-ho was the tipping point for him to throw away his morality and become the next front man. Let's kick off the bottom 5 with Suit Man, or the Suit Man, who you might remember as the one who recruited gi-hun and the others for the Squid Game. He returns in season 2, where we get to see more of his past, present, and lack of a future. This dude isn't just a psychotic accessory to murder. He's a sadistic creep who plays twisted games with vulnerable poor people to try and convince them that their only option is to join a life-threatening competition. He goes beyond just doing this for work sometimes, even torturing people as a form of recreation, like when he forced Woo Seok and Mr. Kim to play rock, paper, scissors, and Russian roulette, relishing in their terror. Later in the episode, it's revealed that this guy used to work in the games, and at one point he came across his own father, who he shot without hesitation. Mind you, he didn't reflect on this with any level of somberness or remorse. He reflected on it with pride. This guy was a sadistic monster, and as mean as this feels to say, losing that game of Russian roulette was about the most selfless thing he ever did. It's honestly wild that this guy is anywhere but the bottom spot, but season 1's villain, Jung Deok-soo, player 101, is still one of the sickest people in the entire series. Man, where do we even begin with this guy? He's got so many different aspects of his character, all of them horrible. He's a mass murderer, an organized gangster, a terrorist, a line cutter, and a straight up sadist. This dude fully realized the danger of the game and showed his true colors upon seeing what happened to the victims. He beat 271 to death for the crime of trying to take the food Joksu took more of than he was allowed to, and smiled about it when he was pronounced dead, not to mention laughing at the suicide of 69. if being an all-around piece of human scum weren't enough, this guy was also a total coward. In the Glass Stepping Stones game, he refused to move forward until some of the other players came around him to test the waters, showing that his literal only concern was for his own life. Unlike Sungwoo, who never resorted to violence unless he deemed it necessary, Deok-soo took sincere pleasure in both causing and witnessing the pain and misery of his fellow human beings, only allying himself with people so long as they were useful to him. Deok-soo barely even qualifies as a human. He's a monster in every sense but literal. But as bad as he was, a much more minor character, Namgyu, player 124, is somehow even worse. This may be a surprise, but we're giving Namgyu the Wrath Sarah medal. This season proved him as one of the most ruthless players in the game. Not only was he vicious enough to continue eliminating hiders in hide and seek after he'd already passed just to give himself and Myung-gi more of a potential payout if they won, but he somehow still held on to resentment towards Semi and Thanos after they'd either mildly insulted him or forgot his name? Like, my dude, you literally killed Semi. I at least don't think you're the one who has the right to hold a grudge there. His pettiness and recklessness make him a weirdly terrifying villain, and what lands him so low is the fact that he takes a disturbing amount of pleasure in killing. He's basically confirmed to be a serial killer in hide and seek, commenting on how much he enjoys watching the life leave his victims' eyes as they die. At least his elimination was a solid reminder to never do drugs, kids. Wait, kids really shouldn't be watching this show. Don't do drugs, adults. Landing a lot lower than he did last time, the Silver Medal of Evil goes to Lee Myung-gi, player 333. Remember in our last Good to Evil video on Squid Game where we said that while he's not a model citizen, he does have some level of decency to him? Well, yeah, season 3 decided to throw all that out the window. We wanted to give Myung-gi some grace since he was just told by the woman he loved that she didn't want him in her life or even their babies, but nothing can excuse the absolute sicko he turns into at the end. At first, he actually seems set up for a redemption arc, offering extra food to Junhee and her baby and tricking the greedy old bastards in the final round into believing that he was on their side, right before turning on them to help gi-hun and the baby survive. That's a lot of great character development for Myung-gi, is what I would say if he didn't throw it all in the trash for an act that earned him a Greed Center medal. After successfully eliminating player 100 and his goons, Myung-gi decides to throw away his morals. He tries to force gi-hun to stay behind before the final round, leaving the baby with him so that he could kill it and take all the money. That is one of, if not the most utterly sickening things that anyone has done in this series. Gi-hun straight up offered to be eliminated in 333's place, meaning that not only could 333 and his baby have survived, the money would have been all his, since the other player was literally an infant. Further still, it was his infant. He had a perfect offer and he refused out of trust issues? Sorry, dude, but no amount of trust issues justifies being willing to throw your baby off a cliff for money just because it's an easier option. We could kinda see the case for an insanity plea, but given how crafty he is throughout most of the games, we don't buy that he's unable to rationalize that murdering his baby is a very, very bad thing. He was literally about to kill his own child for no reason except for the fact that it would make his problems just slightly easier to solve. The writers just hated this dude in season 3 for some reason. He went from a good, morally gray competitor to a cartoonishly evil sociopath, but even he can't quite compare to our top spot. And by process of elimination, you might know where this is going. The VIPs are genuinely the most depraved human beings imaginable. Right off the bat, we'll give them the Gluttony Sinner Medal for their appetite for pleasure, which seems to be all that drives them. They spend their days betting money on the contestants in the games, betting on them like gamblers bet on horses, and placing absolutely no value on their worth as human beings. One of them got mad at player 69 for hanging himself, not because he was sad about it, but because he just bet so much money on him. And if that weren't enough to convince you guys, they somehow become even worse in season 3. And we aren't just talking about how much they creepily enjoyed hunting the losing players during the games. They literally convinced the guards to make the baby a legitimate player in the game.
Putting the baby in the game was genius. Made it twice as fun and dramatic.
These sickos are so out of touch with their humanity, if there's any of it left, that they see an infant being born in these death games and argue that she should be considered a player solely because it would make the games more interesting. It's because of these scumbags that the games continue. They continue to bet money for bigger games with bigger crimes against humanity, so their entertainers keep providing for it. I'm not saying the people running the Squid Game are innocent by any means at all, in any way, but the VIP's lack of human decency on a single level makes them an easy choice for the most evil characters in the entirety of Squid Game.